The Elephant Man wasn't just a black and white period drama. It was a brutal battle of art versus expectation, a production filled with rejected stars, makeup nightmares, and even Oscar-level controversy. What audiences saw was haunting, but the story behind the story was stranger still. Today we're diving into 20 weird facts about the Elephant Man that Hollywood never told you. Stick around for the bonus fact. It might just change how you see the entire film. Let's get into it. 1. The babysitter who started it. All this film wouldn't exist without a babysitter. Producer Jonathan Sanger was heading out in 1978 when his babysitter casually mentioned her boyfriend had written a script. Like every Hollywood veteran, Sanger rolled his eyes. Everyone had a script. But out of politeness, he took it home. He shoved it in a drawer and forgot about it. Months later, while cleaning, he stumbled across it and gave it a read. The script was extraordinary. It told the story of Joseph Merrick, known to the world as the Elephant Man. That forgotten manuscript lit the spark that became a cinematic masterpiece. What audiences didn't know was that one of the most acclaimed dramas of the 1980s began not in a studio meeting, but with a babysitter making small talk. Fate doesn't knock. It whispers through unexpected people. 2. Mel Brooks, the hidden savior. Behind the shadowy industrial aesthetic of the Elephant Man was the king of comedy, Mel Brooks. Yes, the man who gave the world Blazing Saddles secretly bankrolled one of cinema's darkest dramas. But Brooks made one thing clear. His name would not appear in the credits. He feared audiences would expect parody instead of pain. So he worked behind the curtain, protecting David Lynch's vision against meddling studio executives. When Paramount tried to cut the dreamlike opening and closing scenes, Brooks snapped, "This was Lynch's film, not a group project." Without Brooks's silent authority and money, the movie might have been gutted by compromise. Audiences never saw his fingerprints on screen, but his shadow was everywhere. Comedy's loudest voice chose to stay silent, all so Merrick's story could be told with dignity. 3. Dustin Hoffman, rejected hard. Fresh off his Oscar win for Kramer vs. Kramer, Dustin Hoffman wanted the role of John Merrick so badly he begged for it. He pushed meetings, argued his case, and believed he could disappear under prosthetics. Producer Jonathan Sanger didn't agree. It wasn't Hoffman's talent in question. It was his fame. Sanger feared that no matter how heavy the makeup, audiences would spend the entire movie whispering, "That's Dustin Hoffman under there." He wanted someone less familiar, someone who could vanish into the role completely. So Hoffman was flatly rejected. It wasn't Hollywood politics. It was about protecting the story. And so, one of the decade's biggest stars was locked out of one of cinema's most unforgettable roles. Sometimes rejection isn't about ability. It's about being invisible when the story demands it. 4. John Hurt's torture chamber. John Hurt didn't just play Joseph Merrick. He endured him. Each filming day began at 5 a.m. and transformed into a 19-hour ordeal. Makeup took 9 agonizing hours to apply, and another 2 to remove. The prosthetics were so tight he couldn't chew solid food. He survived on liquids sipped through a straw. The headpiece alone weighed nearly 20 pounds, crushing his neck until he ached in silence. Heat trapped under the latex made him sweat relentlessly. His skin blistered from glue, and he lost 12 pounds during production. At one point, he muttered, "I think they've finally made me hate acting." The crew didn't laugh. They knew he wasn't joking. He wasn't just portraying suffering. He was living it. 5. Makeup that terrified everyone. Makeup artist. Christopher Tucker wasn't satisfied with guesswork. He visited the Royal London Hospital and studied an actual plaster cast of Joseph Merrick's body, complete with strands of his original hair. From that, Tucker created 15 prosthetic pieces assembled in exact sequence daily. The result was so disturbingly real that people thought set photos were actual color pictures of the real Elephant Man. Crew members couldn't look at Hurt in costume. Visitors gasped or fell silent. Even director David Lynch admitted to having nightmares after the first test screening of the makeup. What the world didn't know was that Hurt's transformation wasn't just an effect. It created a ghostly presence on set. Every time he walked in, it felt like Merrick himself had stepped out of the 1800s and into Pinewood Studios. 6. Jack Nance almost got the role. David Lynch's first choice for Merrick wasn't John Hurt. It was Jack Nance, the star of his surreal debut Eraserhead. Lynch trusted Nance like family and believed his face could radiate emotion without words. For a while, it seemed certain, until Lynch saw The Naked Civil Servant. John Hurt's performance was so transformative that Lynch froze in his tracks. Hurt vanished into his character, embodying pain and fragility without losing dignity. Lynch knew instantly that only Hurt could carry Merrick's burden. It wasn't about loyalty anymore. It was about survival of the story. Had Nance been cast, The Elephant Man might have been an entirely different movie. Maybe too strange. Maybe too small. Instead, Lynch chose the actor who could break hearts through silence. Sometimes one performance shifts the entire destiny of a film. 7. Anthony Hopkins didn't trust Lynch. When Anthony Hopkins was cast as Dr. Frederick Treves, he wasn't sold on David Lynch. All Hopkins knew was Eraserhead, a bizarre, unsettling cult film. Safe wasn't the word that came to mind. Hopkins hesitated until he read the script. The relationship between Treves and Merrick carried an emotional weight he couldn't ignore. Still skeptical, Hopkins finally met Lynch in person. The meeting lasted hours. Lynch poured out his heart, describing Merrick's isolation and the surreal world he inhabited. By the end, Hopkins didn't just agree. He was all in. What audiences didn't know was that one of cinema's greatest actors nearly walked away because he thought Lynch might turn the story into something too strange. Instead, Hopkins found not chaos, but compassion in Lynch, and that trust became the foundation of his unforgettable performance. 8th, a star-studded risk. Despite Lynch being practically unknown, legendary actors John Gielgud and Wendy Hiller joined the cast. Why? The script. It spoke to them in a way Hollywood thrillers couldn't. They weren't drawn to Lynch's reputation. He had none. They were drawn to Merrick's dignity. Gielgud, one of Britain's most revered stage actors, could have dismissed the project as a dark oddity. Instead, he threw his weight behind it, giving the film instant credibility. Hiller, known for her gravitas, did the same. These weren't Hollywood hopefuls chasing a paycheck. They were veterans recognizing art. Their presence silenced doubts that Lynch was just an eccentric filmmaker. What audiences saw as a deeply human drama only worked because icons of the stage believed in it. Their choice transformed an unlikely project into a serious piece of cinema. 9. Heaven's Gate saved. The Elephant Man John Hurt was originally tied up in one of Hollywood's most disastrous productions, Heaven's Gate. Cameras rolled, then stalled, then shut down for days at a time. The chaos gave Hurt unexpected breathing room. During one of these endless breaks, he was offered The Elephant Man. With careful scheduling, he filmed all of Merrick's scenes during Heaven's Gate's downtime, then returned to Tomino's collapsing set. Ironically, one of the biggest disasters in film history cleared the path for Hurt to play Merrick. Had Heaven's Gate been smooth sailing, Hurt might never have been available. What audiences didn't realize was that cinematic disaster and cinematic triumph were intertwined. The failure of one film gave birth to another. Hollywood history has strange symmetry. Sometimes one flop clears the stage for a masterpiece. 10th, black and white gamble pays off. In 1980, Hollywood was chasing color blockbusters. The Elephant Man arrived in stark black and white. Executives worried audiences wouldn't accept it. It looked too old, too bleak. But Lynch insisted. Merrick's story belonged in shadows, not Technicolor. The risk worked. The monochrome palette pulled viewers into a Victorian London that felt brutally authentic. Cold hospitals, grimy streets, and suffocating smoke. It wasn't nostalgic. It was oppressive. Audiences didn't just watch. They felt trapped. In Merrick's world, that gamble paid off at the box office, earning $26 million on a $5 million budget. While critics praised its artistry, the real shock was that audiences embraced it. Not spectacle, but shadow sold tickets. In a decade dominated by gloss and explosions, The Elephant Man proved darkness could shine brighter than neon. And before we dive into the next set of shocking truths, go ahead and like and subscribe, because the next 10 facts will show you how this movie didn't just change Hollywood, it changed medicine, awards history, and even how we talk about disability today. 11. The Oscars snub that changed history. The Elephant Man scored 8 Academy Award nominations in 1981, tying with Raging Bull. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Screenplay. It seemed destined for gold, but it won nothing. The most shocking loss? Makeup. Christopher Tucker's prosthetics were revolutionary, yet the Academy didn't even have a category for Best Makeup. Outrage erupted. Letters poured in from makeup artists demanding recognition. The Academy didn't reverse its decision, but the protest forced change. The following year, they created a brand new category, Best Makeup. The Elephant Man didn't just influence audiences, it rewrote Oscars history. Every future winner in that category, from An American Werewolf in London to The Darkest Hour, owes its existence to Merrick's haunting recreation. What audiences never knew is that John Hurt's face didn't just move people, it moved the Academy itself. 12. A surprise box office triumph. No one expected The Elephant Man to succeed commercially. A black and white film about a deformed Victorian man, directed by the creator of Eraserhead? Hollywood executives braced for failure? Yet, against all odds, the film grossed more than $26 million in North America alone, 5 times its modest budget. Word of mouth spread quickly. This wasn't exploitation. It was art. Audiences came out of theaters in silence, shaken, moved, changed. The movie became a sleeper hit. What shocked insiders most wasn't the profit. It was the audience. Teenagers, couples, and families came, proving that dignity and tragedy could draw crowds just as effectively as explosions and car chases. The lesson: you don't need special effects to shock people. Sometimes the darkest stories, told simply, hold the greatest power. 13. Lynch almost directed Star Wars. The success of The Elephant Man was so staggering, it thrust David Lynch into the mainstream overnight. Studios lined up to court him. The wildest offer came from George Lucas. After seeing Merrick's story brought to life with such style, Lucas asked Lynch to direct Return of the Jedi. Imagine it. Star Wars filtered through Lynch's surreal lens. Lynch turned it down. The galaxy far, far away wasn't his universe. Instead, he went on to make Dune, another troubled sci-fi epic, but one that still bore his unique stamp. What fans didn't know was that the man who terrified them with Merrick's deformities nearly shaped Ewoks, lightsabers, and the fate of Luke Skywalker. A single choice steered Lynch away from one of Hollywood's biggest franchises. Instead, he chose to remain strange. 14. The restoration that revealed ghosts. In 2020, just as theaters worldwide were closing due to COVID-19, The Elephant Man returned in a fully restored 4K edition. Overseen by Lynch himself, the restoration wasn't just a polish. It revealed details unseen for decades. Textures in Victorian fabrics, shadows lurking in hospital wards, faint expressions beneath John Hurt's prosthetics. Collectors lined up for the special edition, which included art cards and even a pop-up church. For audiences streaming at home, the film felt eerily current, its themes of isolation and dignity sharper than ever. 40 years later, the film didn't fade. It grew stronger. What people didn't expect was that in a year defined by loneliness and masks, Merrick's story resonated more than ever. The Elephant Man wasn't trapped in the past. It was reborn for a new generation. 15. The wrong name that stuck. Here's a fact most audiences never realize. The film's hero wasn't John Merrick. His real name was Joseph Merrick. The error began in a doctor's memoir, where his name was misprinted. That mistake spread like wildfire through plays, books, and films until it became accepted fact. Even when evidence surfaced correcting it, filmmakers ignored it. Audiences already knew him as John. Lynch followed tradition, not truth. It wasn't deception, but inertia. What viewers didn't see was how a single clerical mistake shaped history, cementing the wrong name forever in popular culture. Joseph Merrick, the man, was lost under John Merrick, the myth. His struggle wasn't just with his deformities. It was with a world that couldn't even get his name right. And sometimes, that simple misnaming can feel like the cruelest indignity of all. 16. A villain who never existed. In the film, Merrick's tormentor is Bites, a violent drunken showman who kidnaps him, cages him, and treats him like an animal. Audiences shuddered at his cruelty. But bites never existed. The real exhibitor was Tom Norman, a flamboyant businessman but not a sadist. Norman ran sideshows, yes, but records suggest he treated Merrick far more decently than portrayed. Their partnership lasted only weeks before police shut the show down. Norman raised a family, became an auctioneer, and insisted he never abused Merrick. The movie needed a villain, so history was twisted. What audiences didn't know was that Hollywood erased a real man and replaced him with a monster. 17. A fictional kidnapping. One of the film's most harrowing sequences shows Merrick, dragged from the hospital by bites, stuffed into a cage, and forced to live among animals before circus performers rescue him. It's unforgettable. It's also completely false. Merrick was never kidnapped. He lived out his final years quietly at the London hospital, protected and visited by well-wishers. Why invent such cruelty? Lynch and the writers wanted to dramatize Merrick's journey, showing how far he'd come from sideshow exploitation. But it came at a cost. Audiences walked away believing Merrick's suffering was even worse than reality. What people didn't realize was that the most shocking scene in The Elephant Man was a fabrication. In this case, cinema chose horror over history. Sometimes truth isn't enough. Hollywood adds its own nightmare. 18. The actress who never visited. In the film, actress Mrs. Kendall becomes Merrick's friend, visits him frequently, and even bears her body in one tender but strange moment of trust. It's touching, it's moving, and it's false. The real Mrs. Kendall did raise funds for Merrick's care, but there's little evidence they ever met face to face. Hollywood took a charitable donor and turned her into a character, a symbol of society's acceptance. What audiences didn't know was that the most emotional bond in the movie was largely invented. Merrick's real friendships were quieter, with doctors and a few supporters who treated him with dignity. The Mrs. Kendall storyline gave viewers a tearful connection, but it was cinema's invention, not Merrick's truth. In rewriting history, the film gave him a comfort he never actually knew. 19. The death wish that killed him. Perhaps the most heartbreaking fact of all. Merrick died because of the one thing he longed for. His head was enormous, 91 centimeters in circumference, so heavy it forced him to sleep upright, knees tucked, head resting forward. He told Dr. Treves that his greatest wish was to sleep like normal people, lying down. In April 1890, at just 27 years old, he tried. He laid back in bed. His head tilted, his neck snapped, and he died instantly. Merrick didn't die in spectacle. He died in silence, pursuing the most ordinary of human comforts, sleep. 20. The elephant curse myth. Merrick himself once believed his deformities came from his mother being frightened by an elephant while pregnant. The story fit Victorian superstition, where maternal shocks shaped children. It was dramatic, mysterious, and easy to sell to crowds. Plays and pamphlets repeated it, and it became part of the Elephant Man legend. Of course, modern science proved it impossible. What Merrick really had was a genetic condition later identified as Proteus syndrome, where certain bones and tissues grow uncontrollably. Yet the elephant myth stuck, haunting his memory even as doctors learned the truth. What audiences didn't know was that Merrick's most famous origin story was a tragic fiction he believed about himself. The elephant curse wasn't just a sideshow gimmick. It was a man's desperate attempt to explain his own suffering. Bonus fact: DNA secrets locked in bone. Over a century after his death, Joseph Merrick's body still holds mysteries. For decades, doctors misdiagnosed him with neurofibromatosis. Only later did researchers suspect Proteus syndrome, but science wants certainty. In recent years, teams have attempted to extract DNA from Merrick's preserved bones. The hope? To finally confirm the exact genetic mutation that warped his body. It's no easy task. Time decays everything. Yet advances in molecular research mean his skeleton may still reveal its secrets. Imagine it. Over 130 years after crowds paid to gawk at him, Merrick could provide answers not for spectacle, but for science. What audiences never realized is that Merrick's story didn't end in 1890. His body still whispers to researchers, and his legacy continues shaping medicine. The Elephant Man isn't finished teaching us who we are. The Elephant Man wasn't just a film. It was a collision of art and agony, of fiction and history, of spectacle and dignity. Behind the prosthetics, John Hurt nearly collapsed from exhaustion. Behind the shadows, Mel Brooks quietly defended a story no one thought would sell. And behind Merrick's tragic legend lies a truth stranger than Hollywood dared to show, of a man who lived, suffered, and longed for nothing more than to be ordinary. This movie changed the Oscars, rewrote medical history, and forced audiences to see beyond deformity into humanity. And that is why 40 years later, it still leaves viewers shaken. So if you found these hidden truths as haunting as Merrick's cry, "I am not an animal, I am a human being," then go ahead and like, subscribe, and share. Because some stories deserve to be remembered, no matter how dark the shadows.